Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Rockets and artillery fire could be seen and heard in many cities in Ukraine as the war with Russia continues. Canada sending more humanitarian aid to Ukraine. We will explain how the funds will be helping out. And as the Alberta government lifts more COVID-19 restrictions, we get reactions from local business owners.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. More than 660,000 Ukrainians have now fled their country as the war with Russia continues. Russian forces have launched their attacks around the clock, forcing many residents to also seek shelter underground. Smoke could be seen billowing from a number of buildings in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Infrastructure has been heavily damaged by rocket and artillery fire. The Vladimir Putin regime has been targeting airfields and fuel facilities and what appears to be the next phase of the invasion that has been slowed by fierce resistance. Various reports say there have so far been 644 people killed since the war began just under a week ago. That includes more than 240 civilians. CBN reporter George Thomas is on the ground in the city of Lviv and has the latest on the Ukrainians leaving Kyiv.
Tens of thousands of people have been fleeing Kyiv and other cities in the eastern part of the country since Russia's invasion. So many of them, as you can see, are arriving here in Lviv. And the United Nations is now warning that the escalating violence could lead to some 5 million refugees fleeing for Ukraine's neighbors.
Meanwhile, a maternity ward from a hospital in Kharkiv has been moved to a bomb shelter for safety as the shelling campaign by the Russian military continues. The cries from babies could be heard amid the thick concrete walls and dim lighting just 20 kilometers from Russia. The mayor of Kharkiv said residential areas were being shelled and that this is a war to destroy the Ukrainian people. Speaking from another bomb shelter in Kyiv, FEBC reporter Igor Sadaya explains why he's able to share a message of hope online to those who don't know Jesus.
Many of people are even don't know about Jesus Christ before. They never prayed, but in this time they understand that only God can protect them. So they receive Jesus, they receive God, they receive prayers which I pray for them. And it's really hard to understand, but pray for us. We really need this. And God's do a lot of miracles. I want to say that 2 days ago, in this home where I right now, it's Kyiv, Ukraine, a rocket bomb was fell down 100 meters from our home, but everyone in safety. All people who is living near from us in safety, and no one, thank you for God, no one wasn't in this home before bomb was fell down. I'm sorry I can't right now speaking because I should go there. Thank you very much for your support. God bless you. Thank you.
Ukrainian President Zelensky spoke via video link at the European Parliament in Brussels, where lawmakers have strongly criticized Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
За наші права, свободу, за життя. А зараз ми боремося за виживання. І це найголовніша наша мотивація. Але ми боремося і за те, щоб бути рівноправними членами Європи.
Zelensky also says any foreign fighters who wish to fight for Ukraine would be welcomed with open arms and given weapons. A wave of foreign nationals have arrived in Ukraine from all walks of life, including a Toronto comedian and a semi-professional goalkeeper from Guelph, Ontario, have flown to Europe with little to no training. Ukraine's foreign ministry says the country has received hundreds of requests from foreigners who wish to join the fighting. People are signing up at their nearest Ukrainian embassy in their home country before flying out. U.S. government officials are meeting to discuss what kind of sanctions on Russia are most effective moving forward as the war between Russia and Ukraine continues to escalate.
We're buying over 600,000 barrels a day of crude from Russia. We've been doing this for quite some time. And I just think that basically for us to set the example and ask the rest of the world to step up to the plate, we have to step up to the plate. That means basically reversing some of the decisions that have been made, but no leasing not drilling, and basically cutting back. We need energy independence more now than ever before.
We're not using the energy sector as a weapon. We're failing to hit Putin where it hurts the most. 40% of the oil and gas, 40% of the revenue of the Russian economy comes from oil and gas. Republicans are asking Democrats to do this. It will increase prices here at home. There's no doubt. But we're also asking the administration to contemplate changing their policy about energy production here at home. We believe now's the time for us to increase energy production to make up to our allies what they may lose if we go after Russia hard.
Canadian Defence Minister Anita Anand says Canada will continue providing more lethal aid to Ukraine in its battle against Russian forces.
At the further request of Ukraine and in coordination with NATO allies, we are announcing today that we are providing even more lethal aid to Ukraine and will be sending 100 Carl Gustav anti-tank weapon systems and 2,000 rockets, which we will be working to deliver as quickly as possible in the coming days.
The Trudeau Liberals say they'll also be sending an additional $100 million in humanitarian aid to help Ukrainians. The funds will help support emergency health care services, including trauma care for displaced populations, also shelter, water, food, and sanitation supplies. International Development Minister Harjit Sajjan says Global Affairs Canada is working with organizations in other countries to coordinate how the aid will be dispersed.
At times of crisis, what we want to do is make sure we get the support ready to go. Give it to the people who actually need it so they can adjust very quickly to the needs on the ground. And that is very important. So we have an idea because of, regrettably, there's other crises that we've dealt in the past. But we want to be flexible as possible in adjusting for the situation on the ground. And then we will work with the United States, EU, to coordinate any other further support.
Samaritan's Purse has deployed boots on the ground in Poland, Romania, and Moldova to help out Ukrainian refugees during their war with Russia. The team is conducting rapid needs assessments to determine how the Christian organization can help out with emergency supplies. The News Media Relations Manager for Samaritan's Purse Canada, Frank King, says there are more than 25 disaster response specialists on the ground, including 8 Canadians.
So at this point, we're still assessing all the needs, trying to figure out where are the refugees coming to, what exact condition are they in, and how long are they going to be there, those sorts of questions. So we're doing a lot of that kind of work. We're consulting with governments, we're consulting with church partners, we're also consulting with other non-governmental organizations who are also on the ground in those areas to help the refugees who have come across the border from Ukraine.
Samaritan's Purse works with 3,000 churches across Ukraine and is in the process of giving out over 600,000 Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes for kids in need. Many people on social media have been comparing Vladimir Putin to Adolf Hitler, saying their approaches and attitudes have been quite similar. Political reporter Brian Lilly says Putin wants to unite all Russian speakers, and that's something that Hitler did during the First and Second World War when it came to those who spoke German.
But what was Hitler talking about consistently was that he needed to go and unite the German speakers. Putin is talking in exactly the same way as he says we need to unite the Russian speakers. Well, just because they're Russian speakers doesn't mean they want to be part of Russia. They may very well want to stay part of Latvia or Lithuania, where they have much more freedom than they do in Russia. But he is talking in a way that is dangerously close. It mirrors what Hitler was saying prior to war.
Mr. Lilly will also have details on the CPC leadership race. Watch that Q&A coming up after business news. Well, it was nice to feel the warmth again in Lethbridge, but things are changing rapidly. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early peek at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it seems like Old Man Winter will be paying us a visit again very soon.
Yeah, he sure will be, Hal, because as early as this evening, we could be seeing the white stuff all over again. So we do have a 30% chance of flurries overnight tonight into tomorrow, Wednesday. We're also seeing a 60% chance of flurries. Tomorrow's high only getting up to -5 as well. And by the way, today, I don't think we got anywhere close to that 13 degrees. So no record breaker for today. Starting tonight all the way through the rest of the week, we're seeing snow. We're seeing minus temperatures until at least the weekend. I will we'll have more details coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Premier Jason Kenney and Health Minister Jason Copping made the announcement that Step 2 of lifting restrictions in Alberta has now been put into place. Masking is no longer required. This means a huge change for businesses, as the city of Lethbridge will be following the guidelines of the province. As Micah Quinn explains now, a Lethbridge pub is celebrating the province's announcement.
We're ecstatic. We don't have to wear the masks. I mean, it's a choice that our staff or our customers can make if they feel like they'd like to, and that's not a problem at all.
Vicky Vandenhoek, the owner and operator of Honker's Pub and Eatery, says the team at the local bar had a meeting on Tuesday morning, and it was great to finally be able to see the smiling faces of staff.
You don't realize how much you miss that. And just sometimes people use facial expressions to pass hello, and when you can't smile or do that, it was missed.
On Tuesday morning, the Alberta government announced that Step 2 of COVID restrictions in the province have now been lifted. This means provincial school requirements, including cohorting, are removed. Screening for youth activities are no longer required, and capacity limits are now lifted for all venues as well. Limits on social gatherings are also removed. One of the biggest announcements was the provincial mask mandate being taken away. Masking is still required on public transportation, at Alberta Health Services facilities, and continuing care settings.
We've always said that public health restrictions in Alberta will only be there as long as they are absolutely necessary to prevent overloading our hospitals.
Restrictions have now been lifted for mingling between tables at restaurants and bars, along with a 10-person per table limit. Liquor can also be served without any time limits now as well.
The last time that we could not serve anymore after 11 o'clock, and they had to be out by 12:30. So if you were running an event that went, from 7 to midnight, well, then you couldn't have liquor service for the last hour, and then they had to be out within a half an hour.
The mandatory work from home requirement has also been removed. Isolation for COVID-19 symptoms or positive tests are still in place. Isolation periods are 5 days at home and 5 days of masking for fully vaccinated individuals, or 10 days for partially or unvaccinated people. Step 3 of restrictions will be lifted if hospitalization rates continue downwards. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well, the city of Lethbridge has begun easing some COVID-19 restrictions for city staff. Employees will no longer be required to show proof of vaccination. Face masks will be optional, and those who've been working from home are able to return to work. Jason Elliott with the city, however, explains there are still some employees who will have restrictions, but overall, they believe falling in line with the province is the best approach.
We do have a couple of operational areas that are under different rules and regulations, such as our fire EMS folks fall under the AHS policies, so those still remain in place. And our airport staff are federally regulated, so there would be some specific requirements that those staff are still asked to comply with. Throughout this pandemic, we've worked hard to comply with the provincial direction on any health measures that are put in place, and it's no different when the health measures are removed.
Elliott adds the city remains optimistic that we're nearing the end of the pandemic, and hopefully in the near future, more health measures can be dropped. Now that many COVID-19 restrictions have been dropped, including mask wearing, this could have some people worrying about contracting the virus quicker, especially those who are immunocompromised. An infectious disease specialist says those who have immune system issues are losing half of their protection, and they're more at risk around those who will not be wearing masks.
Many of these patients have been restricting their activities throughout the pandemic, so cutting back on the number of people they have contact with. Now that we've got rapid testing in place, having people, if you're going to have contact with masks on, you're doing rapid testing before you have contact. But now, of course, is that at least half of the protection you get when you're out in public from masks is the other person wearing a mask. So it's problematic for them now at that point in time.
Gregson says the best way for those with a compromised immune system to protect themselves is to still wear a mask and be fully vaccinated. Now, despite the city relaxing its masking mandate, the University of Lethbridge will continue to uphold it until the end of the spring semester. According to the U of L's online message board, many students made decisions to attend the university in the spring semester based, in part, on masking requirements. The U of L will continue with its current masking requirements within all campus buildings until the end of the semester. However, the university's vaccine mandate for students and employees accessing campus has now been dropped. Vaccination will also not be a requirement for registration in the summer or fall of 2022. An unfair labor practice complaint has been filed by the University of Lethbridge Faculty Association against the university's Board of Governors. The complaint, which was filed with the Alberta Labour Relations Board, alleges the Board of Governors has refused to bargain seriously throughout the current round of negotiations and now refuses to come to the table to negotiate at all. The faculty strike is now into day 20 following 2 years of failed talks.
The University of Lethbridge Faculty Association has never refused an invitation to the table in 2 years. The same cannot be said of the Board of Governors side. And since the beginning of the lockout and the strike, the Board of Governors has received multiple unconditional invitations from Alpha to return to the bargaining table and negotiate. They have said explicitly 3 times, quoting themselves, that they don't believe that a meeting would be productive. And so they have in fact refused each of our invitations since the beginning of the strike. The faculty and the students at this university are tired of being treated by the Board of Governors completely without respect.
For their part, the University of Lethbridge says it's the Faculty Association that is refusing to meet at the negotiating table. They also say the university has ensured faculty members remain well compensated, and over the last decade, faculty have had pay increases of 34%. Lethbridge police have charged 3 youths with multiple offenses in connection with 2 separate assaults at city high schools on Monday. Police first responded to a call of an assault outside of Victoria Park High School. The initial incident involved 2 students attacking a 15-year-old. During the investigation, police discovered a second incident which occurred outside of Winston Churchill High School. The same 2 suspects, along with a third, were involved in an altercation that saw 2 16-year-old students sprayed with bear spray. None of the 3 victims required medical attention. All 3 remain in custody awaiting a judicial interim release hearing. Lethbridge County's annual bursary program is back. Applications are open for anyone who's looking to take some post-secondary classes. Every year, students from Lethbridge County can apply to receive money to help in their continuing education. Tori Campbell with the county says they've received some solid feedback so far.
First year that we offered the program, I think it wasn't as well received as we had hoped, just in the sense that I don't think we pushed it out far enough, and maybe it wasn't well known. But I know the second year, I know the team at the county did a really good job of trying to reach out as far as they could through various media channels, through the county social media channels, through the website. And we actually got a lot of applicants last year, a lot of really strong applicants last year.
Campbell says this year, 2 students will receive around $1,000 for their first year of studies. Not bad. Well, the warmer temperatures we've been experiencing in southwestern Alberta are on their way out, and snow is on the way in. Further weather details are coming up shortly. Well, it's great to see some milder temperatures the past few days, but things are changing. Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the expression bend at the knees when it comes to shoveling will come into play once again this week?
Yeah, I think it will come into play, Hal, and it's a good exercise tip too, because we are about to get dusted with a whole lot of snow. Beginning this evening, we are seeing a 30% chance of flurries overnight. Into tomorrow, Wednesday, 60% chance of flurries. That's where the minuses begin. So we're going to see minuses all the way through this week. -5 tomorrow, -6 and flurries on Thursday, -8 on Friday, and -6 on a Saturday with snow as well. So yeah, like you were saying earlier, Old Man Winter back at us again up until the weekend. Sunday, it looks like we're going to see those plus temperatures again. +5 on Sunday with sunshine, and 4 degrees on Monday with a mix of sun and clouds. So the average high for this time of year, 3 degrees, average low -9, 15. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1994. I thought we were going to get there today, but I don't think we did. -30 was our lowest temperature on record back in 1989. Sun rose this morning at 7:14. Sunset this evening, 6:13, giving us around 11 hours of daylight. Looking to the west coast tomorrow, we're seeing showers in both Victoria and Vancouver. 11 the high tomorrow in Victoria, 12 the high in Vancouver, -7 tomorrow in Edmonton, seeing some flurries there. Now, Calgary's flurries could be also changing to freezing drizzle tomorrow with a high of -6. So not the nicest weather tomorrow in Calgary expected. -4 in Saskatoon, going to feel a little bit chillier with that wind chill, but sunny skies though. That's the consolation there. -1 the high in Regina with a chance of flurries. -15 tomorrow in Winnipeg with clearing skies. Going to feel the wind chill factor as well there. 2 degrees the high in Toronto tomorrow with snow expected. -3 the high in Ottawa. Same thing for Montreal, -3 there, with increasing clouds throughout the day in Montreal tomorrow. As we look further east into Atlantic Canada, seeing Fredericton right there, 1 degree the high with flurries, seeing a mix of rain and snow, so it's snow turning to rain in both Charlottetown and Halifax tomorrow, high of 5. In Halifax, 3 the high in Charlottetown, -2 the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with a mix of sun and cloud there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Bank of Canada is expected to start a series of interest rate hikes this week to help wrestle down inflation. Governor Tiff Macklem will raise the benchmark interest rate by 1/4 percentage point to 0.5% at a policy decision on Wednesday. The Bank of Canada is also seen unveiling part of its plan to shrink holdings of government bonds over the past couple of years. The rate move would be the first increase in borrowing costs since 2018. Alberta's Jobs, Economy and Innovation Minister says venture capital investment in the province continues to break records. Doug Schweitzer says Alberta's venture capital industry has had 3 straight years of growth. He says 2021 saw a total of $561 million in deals. Officials say compared with last year, overall venture capital investment was up 15.7% and the number of deals increased by 64.2%. The province says the areas seeing increased investment include the information and technology sectors and life sciences. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The Russian war with Ukraine really played havoc with the markets once again today. The TSX was down 121 points to 21,004. The Dow was down 597 points to 33,294. The S&P 500 was down 67 points to 4306. And the Nasdaq was down 218 points to 13,532. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 769 to 103.41 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 17 cents to 4.57 US. Gold was up a cent to 19.4530 US an ounce, and silver was also up a cent to 25.39 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.79 per bushel. Barley's at $9.69. Canola's at $24.43, and corn is at $11.43 per bushel. Live cattle were down 90 cents to $140.53. Feeder cattle were down $1.45 to $156.28, and lean hogs were up $2.70 to $106.20. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 78.48 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the death toll from the Russian invasion of Ukraine now stands at close to 700. Many others have also been severely injured. The United Nations says close to 700,000 refugees have also fled Ukraine to neighboring countries. Canada's pledged an extra $100 million in humanitarian aid. A lot of the funds will help support emergency healthcare services, including trauma care for displaced populations, also shelter, water, food, and sanitation supplies. Now, in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Ottawa says it will be banning Russian oil into Canada. Political reporter Brian Lilly says that move is more symbolic than ever, and will explain why in just a moment. Canada's implemented a number of sanctions on Russia since Vladimir Putin launched an invasion of Ukraine, and now Ottawa's unveiled a ban on Russian oil imports. To talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly. Brian, is this more of just a symbolic gesture since Canada really doesn't apparently import much Russian oil?
It very much is symbolic because what the Prime Minister has said is that we are banning the import of crude oil from Russia. Now, we haven't really imported crude oil, something even he acknowledged in the House of Commons. We haven't imported crude oil since 2019. And when we were importing crude oil from Russia, it was about 17,000 barrels per day. That may sound like a lot to people, but it's not. It was always less than 3% of our imports. To put it in perspective, a lot of people don't know that British Columbia is an oil-producing province. They produce almost as many barrels per day as we were importing from Russia. But as I said, we stopped bringing in crude in 2019. We are still importing refined petroleum products. So, that comes in various forms. We need to stop that as well.
Now, many voices here in Western Canada are calling for increased oil production and potentially bringing back the Keystone XL pipeline, which we'd really celebrate here in Alberta. But is that likely to happen? Brian, what's the Biden administration saying, or how about the Trudeau Liberals?
The Biden administration is saying no. I mean, they were asked on the weekend. George Stephanopoulos from ABC was interviewing Biden's press secretary, and he quoted Garry Kasparov, who is, former chess grandmaster. He's become a, virulent Putin critic, but also he leads up a human rights organization now. And he said, look, oil and gas is a major part of what's going on, and we need to expand production elsewhere and bring back Keystone XL. Jen Sakari, who's the press secretary for Biden, said, no, that's a non-starter. We need to move away from oil and gas. Well, that is still a long way off. I've been hearing that for 20 years, Hal. So we do need to expand oil and gas production. Building pipelines is going to take time, but long term, that is part of the solution. Unfortunately, we have a government that doesn't see the value in that. Just on February 7th, less than a month ago now, the Trudeau government kiboshed the building of the Energy Saguenay pipeline system. Now, this would have built a liquefied natural gas port near Lac Saint-Jean, the Saguenay River in Quebec. It would have taken Western Canadian natural gas, converted into liquefied natural gas, and shipped it out to places in Europe and elsewhere through a port in Quebec. The Quebec government had approved it. They said no. We see what's going on with the Coastal GasLink, attacks. I want to call them sabotage, or I don't know what else to call them. But there is absolute opposition on the progressive side to building more oil and gas capacity in this country. Now, the war in Ukraine is not over oil and gas, but it is central to it because it fills Putin's coffins, and it also it is a threat. He threatens to cut off the gas supply to Germany and Italy, where they get a tremendous source of their energy from Russia. So, Canada needs to displace some of that. And unfortunately, the government, neither here nor in Washington, is really in favor of that.
Now, beyond the sanctions, there's been more aid being sent to Ukraine from Canada. Brian, what kind of military aid is Ottawa providing?
We're providing some anti-tank weaponry. Now, it's pretty old. It's basically rocket launchers that can take out tanks. It's primitive, but it works. And that's the main thing. So we're sending a number of those launchers along with 2,000 rounds of ammunition. That's to start. This is on top of the fact that we've already sent small arms. We're talking large caliber sniper rifles and the type of rifles that would be used by infantry units. So something similar to the C7 or C9s that our infantry units will carry. It'd be rifles similar to that along with ammunition. We've also sent field hospital materials. We've sent night vision goggles, body armor, helmets. A lot of people laugh at the non-lethal aid, but you shouldn't. It is important because beans and bullets is what they say the Army runs on. You can send the bullets, but if you don't send the beans, meaning food or other supplies they need, they're not going to be able to operate. Ukraine needs all of that. And so we've sent 2 rounds of lethal aid, more rounds of non-lethal aid. The 3rd round of lethal aid, these new rocket launchers, is on their way. These are all good things. It's taken the Trudeau Liberals a while to get here, but kudos to them for getting to this point and adopting what I consider the right position when it comes to facing down Vladimir Putin over Ukraine.
Brian, I'm thinking of the history lessons here, the history books, and chatting with veterans about the First and Second World War. Started off as a European war before North America was dragged into it. Could we see something very similar happening here, just the way everything's unfolding with Russia invading Ukraine? And then maybe more European countries getting involved? Would North America be dragged in? Could Canada be going to war against Russia?
It very much could happen, especially given some of the rhetoric from Vladimir Putin, even more so than what our own leaders are saying. Vladimir Putin has said, if you assist Ukraine in any way, any of these munitions, any of this military aid you give them, I'm going to consider it as you engaging in war with Russia. Well, we've already sent that aid. So if he determines that any of it has been used against Russia, and let's say this column of 40-kilometer long column of troop carriers and armored vehicles moving towards Kiev, let's say that that is taken out in part by, and I hope it is, by Canadian munitions, Putin might turn around and say, well, you're at war. President Biden in the United States has said time and again he does not and will not commit troops. Canada has so far said no, but that they have added that all options are on the table. All options would include the military. So far, we haven't gone that route. But if Putin continues to act the way he has, this could easily spill off into Poland or into Latvia, which are NATO member countries. And if he attacks them, then we are duty bound to go in and defend them and push back against Russia.
When you've been talking to some within the Trudeau Liberal caucus, are they concerned that perhaps Putin is trying to reunify the USSR? That maybe, Latvia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, some of these other countries may be next? Moldova?
Belarus is effectively a puppet state, and he has already taken a portion of Moldova through Transnistria. He's taken portions of Georgia. He talks about the Russian-speaking parts of Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia. And I really do not like comparisons to Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. But what was Hitler talking about consistently was that he needed to go and unite the German speakers. Putin is talking in exactly the same way as he says we need to unite the Russian speakers. Well, just because they're Russian speakers doesn't mean they want to be part of Russia. They may very well want to stay part of Latvia or Lithuania, where they have much more freedom than they do in Russia. But he is talking in a way that is dangerously close. It mirrors what Hitler was saying prior to war. And that's why I think the Trudeau government and every government around the world is on edge and concerned about what's happening.
Now, many governments and organizations around the world have taken action against Russia, Brian, including the NHL, FIFA, and Formula One. Do all of these moves by sports organizations and cultural groups really matter in a war?
They do, because they're things that everyday Russians at home will notice. The media is very much controlled in terms of what it says about the war, or if it tells people about the war at all. I saw one report where a woman in Ukraine, a Russian woman in Ukraine, was phoning back to her family in Russia, telling them that the war had started. And they said, what are you talking about, war with Ukraine? We're not at war with Ukraine. They were not reporting what was happening. And now that they are reporting what's happening, it's a very different spin, which is why we've seen things like moves to remove RT, the Russian propaganda channel, from North American and European airwaves. So if everyday Russians aren't getting the truth and are being told that this is all for their glorious leader, finding out that the Russian soccer team cannot participate in UEFA or FIFA tournaments, that they're kicked out of the World Cup, that the Champions League final, which was supposed to be in St. Petersburg, has been taken away from them, the World Juniors, the World Ice Hockey Championship, the Formula One series, being kicked out of the Eurovision Song Contest. All of these things, eventually people start saying, well, wait a minute, the whole world is mad at us. We're being excluded from all these things that Russia does take great pride in. I think that's part of the reason that Putin waited until after the Olympics. It wasn't out of deference to President Xi in China. It was, let's show the world how great Russia is, and then we will invade Ukraine. That's what I think happened there. So yes, everyday Russians will notice these things. Even finding out that Adidas will no longer work with Russian athletes and sports federations. No tracksuits for you. Well, people will notice these things.
Now, on the sanctions front, you've written that Putin wasn't really expecting this. He was surely expecting sanctions for invading another country. So why do you say he really wasn't expecting the way the world has reacted so far?
Because it's been stronger and more unified than he's seen before. When Putin went into Georgia in 2008, not much happened. When he went to Ukraine in 2014, not much happened. The sanctions were not that strong. They were not as unified. There has been a big push. Germany and Italy in particular were reluctant. As I said earlier, they are heavily reliant on Russian natural gas. And so they were reluctant, and they were seeking carve-outs from the sanctions for things like Italy's luxury goods. Belgium wanted to make sure they could keep their diamond trade going with Russia. They were called out and shamed by fellow European leaders for trying to give in to Russia, and told, no, we need to stand united. So, is it as crippling as it could be? No, but it's more crippling than they were expecting, especially on those banking moves that will make it much more difficult. Look, the ruble tumbled 30% on Monday. It continues to struggle. And the only reason it hasn't fallen dramatically further is that the Russian central bank is having to spend a ton of money. They've doubled their interest rates to 20%. They have had to spend a ton of money propping up the ruble, but also buying up shares of Russian companies which are in free fall at the moment. So this is making it a much more costly war. Putin was not expecting the level and the unity that he's seeing from the Western world at the moment.
Brian, Ontario is joining Alberta, Saskatchewan, and even Quebec in relaxing restrictions today. Now, most of the COVID-19 restrictions and mandates are gone, but when will the Trudeau Liberals consider dropping the remaining mandates and restrictions, including vaccinations for cross-border truckers?
I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. They have dropped some. If you are a Canadian vacation traveler going to the US, let's say, snowbird, you used to have a PCR test to come back. Now you just need a rapid antigen test. In Canada, to be able to get on a plane, that's about $40. In the States, you can get them even cheaper. I think $10 at your local CVS, instead of, at times, up to $150 to $300, depending on your situation. So that's gone by the wayside. But when asked about removing mandates by the Conservatives in the House of Commons earlier this week, they were asked several times by several different Conservative MPs. They said no, and they said that they were steadfast, including for federal civil servants who work remotely and are going to continue working remotely, meaning they don't go into the office, they don't see anybody. So if they're not going to remove them for that, they're not going to remove them for the cross-border truckers. And of course, there's also the problem that the Biden administration would have to remove their mandate at or about the same time. We might see this come off in a few months, but there's no indication at this point that it's going to happen. And if we do see another spike in COVID-19 cases, even if it's not as severe, not as deadly, all of these things, even if the vaccines are working, they're not going to back off. We're going to wait quite some time, I think, before they start dropping these.
Brian, the federal Conservative leadership race still only has one declared candidate so far, which is Pierre Poilievre. But Jean Charest is doing more than just thinking about it. What have you found out so far?
Well, some of my media colleagues were reporting that Charest was being courted, and that top-level Conservative MPs were saying you've got to come out and run. I got sent an email on the weekend. It was forwarded to me as somebody who was on a list that Charest had, asking to donate to his campaign, that fill out this form and we'll hold the donations until he's ready to announce. But we need $100,000 by this coming Friday, just to show that Jean has the backing of the people. So he is apparently doing meetings in Ottawa this week. He's fundraising. He's got people like Gerard Deltel coming out in favor of him, Alain Reyes. Mostly it's a Quebec-based operation so far, but not completely. And, we'll see. He may come in. It's all going to depend on the rules. And that's what I've heard from a bunch of people, whether it's, Patrick Brown, the mayor of Brampton, who used to be the leader of the Ontario Conservatives, or Peter MacKay. They all want to see what the rules are, because if they're going to pick a new leader by April 30th, let's say, or even the middle of June, then they all view that as a push to get Pierre Poilievre coronated. But if these other guys have a chance to sell memberships and build up a campaign, then they think they've got a shot. But Charest, yeah, he's definitely kicking the tires.
How about Leslyn Lewis? Do you think she'll maybe put her hat in the ring?
I think she's in the same position as the others. looking and waiting to see what the rules are. But, some of the people that were around her before, including Charles McVitie from Canada Christian College here in the Toronto area, they're assembling and getting people behind her, ready to go. But again, comes down to the rules. Do you have enough time to sell memberships to either beat Pierre Poilievre or at least do a good showing? Or are the rules set up so that Pierre just becomes the guy? And the committee to set those rules met last weekend. I don't know why they're out yet. It's a bit of a surprise to me, but we'll find out what those are soon. And then we'll find out how many people are actually in the race.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, here in southern Alberta, science and agriculture go hand in hand. Today, we're talking with an expert in remote sensing and farming. Now, this goes far beyond your TV remote control and your grandparents' grain farm. Today, we have Dr. Craig Coburn joining us from the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Coburn's work focuses on the aspects of remote sensing science. All of the scientific research helps growers and researchers better understand agricultural crops and other biological systems. Dr. Craig Coburn, thank you so much for joining us today. So great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, for those of us who maybe don't know or don't quite understand, start off by explaining exactly what remote sensing is.
Well, remote sensing is what we're doing right now. So we're watching, a television screen with our eyes. So we're viewing this. So if we think about taking that same kind of technology and putting it up into space, then we are using satellites to view the Earth's surface and to get information from the data that we derive.
Wow, that's so cool. And we don't really think about it because we just use it every day, don't we? So is your work and research really a high-tech bird's eye view of a farmer's field? Maybe explain that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Much of the research that we do is charged with answering fundamental questions like things like how are the plants growing? How is that crop developing? What could we expect in terms of yield? Those are sorts of really basic questions that people have asked for a long time. And again, from space, we're now able to collect data that can help us derive that piece of information that's needed in modern agriculture.
So was the study of remote sensing then just kind of a logical step of a transition for you?
It's one of the areas in geography that involves geospatial technology. So you'll notice that on cell phones and other things, you can't 10, 15 years ago, I used to have a hard time telling people what I did. Now I just tell them I make Google Earth work and they understand. But when I was doing my graduate degrees, I used to just tell people I made maps for a living, and that would stop them from imagining all kinds of crazy things that I might do. We're geographers, we make maps. These are the technologies that we now use in order to provide information to help manage and monitor our Earth.
That's so cool. So how long has remote sensing technology been around?
Well, we've had active space programs since 1972. We've always wanted to look at ourselves from above. I mean, it's just a human thing. Whenever you can get on top of a hill and look over where you were, it satisfies a human need to know. So it's an interesting thing. As soon as we were able to get airborne, one of the first things we put in a plane was a camera. We wanted to see it. And before we had planes, we had balloons, and we used to put cameras outside the balloons and take the same photograph that every farm I've ever been at has, usually hanging in the dining room, that shows you your farm. That we've been doing that since the 1850s. So these are the kinds of things that just people find it fascinating. They find these things really interesting. But yeah, we've been at it digitally monitoring Earth since the early 70s.
Okay, awesome. So what are some of the ways that farmers in southern Alberta are using this technology to enhance their farming?
Well, we can use it for really basic things like just trying to tell health and condition is probably the biggest one. So crop health and condition we use really typically, and it's not easily done, but it's reasonably straightforward. Let's put it that way, because some of this gets a little bit high tech, and I don't think people want me to go off and deliver that particular lecture. But we can also do things weed detection. That's a new and upcoming area of interest. There's all sorts of modeling that goes on that requires some kind of geospatial input. So that might be on the government side where they're trying to model the bigger picture of how agriculture is doing across the country. So at every level, right from the producer all the way up to those folks in governments that are trying to organize how the whole system works, we are the people that are providing the data.
Well, that's really fascinating. So what have been some of the limitations in the past with this technology?
I think the number one biggest limitation was we just weren't ready for, we didn't have the computing power, we didn't have the ability to visualize it. We couldn't get it to a producer for free, which we can do now. There were a lot of limitations. I mean, technologically, we still suffer that we cannot download all of the data that we can collect from space right now. So we're always pushing the boundary in terms of what we can do. So those were the limitations. Again, 10, 15 years ago, I always tell my students that in 1972, we barely had color television. And we didn't have a video game. My students have a hard time conceptualizing this. And yet we were imaging from space. We were doing the entire globe. So it's difficult for people to sort of capture that. But when you want to bring it right down to people and having these things being utilized in a daily way to manage a modern farm, then it's all about getting data and it's all about making it usable. And so we've had to break down any number of barriers. There's lots of companies, some of them are in Lethbridge, many are in Western Canada generally, that are involved with taking those pieces of data and putting them into digestible bits that farmers are then able to utilize operationally.
Well, that's a really good way to describe it, sort of in a layman's terms. And how do they use it? It's amazing because you're talking about outer space, pinpointing down on a little farmer's crops there. So it really is amazing to me. How is it specifically helping them exactly?
Well, imagine the scenario where you've got, say, the ability to vary the rate of fertilizer application, or you might have some other variable rate technology. One of the things that you need as an input on the farm side is where would we do the application? So if we were going to vary the fertilizer, so if we can reduce input costs and we can get the same growth response from the plant, then we can go ahead and increase productivity and also put money on the bottom line. So when we do those sorts of things, then again, we've got satellites above, they've got giant telescopes, so they see a long way, and we can get it right down to some pretty small areas. And there's other technologies as well. I mean, we're not, there's unmanned aerial vehicles and other things that can be even closer to the target. But from space itself, then we're able to look down on those small spots on Earth, and we're able to take and collect the information that we get there. So we've got, in essence, what the color of the plant is. And then we will be able to do those kinds of variable rate pieces. So we give the information that allows the technology to operate.
That is very, very cool. Does this technology have applications beyond farming?
It's an interesting thing. Oftentimes my students get a little bit excited about it when I list off the number of application areas that are governed by remote sensing. So even if you just start by turning on the satellite, if you click on the satellite button on Google Maps, that's us. So every time you do any of those things, so it could be natural resource driven. So it could be agriculture, it could be forestry, it could be mining. Those folks are using it. It could be, say, for example, we want to watch urban growth. Where are people on this planet? Yeah, we do that. If you want to know how it is that we have information that lets us understand our impact on our planet generally, deforestation, global warming things, are the ice caps really disappearing? Well, of course, we watch that every day. These are all climate variables. We're monitoring CO2 in the atmosphere. These are all, there's a list that would go on. We would waste the entire show just covering the list of contributions that remote sensing makes to the monitoring of Earth. But we used to be in the background, right? So we used to be the people that enabled, we did the science and technology that enabled those data pieces to get pushed forward. Now people are starting to ask questions like yourself about, well, what exactly are you doing? I've talked to any number of producers and they say things like, you're spying on me. And I always say, well, yeah, but we have been since I was a child. This isn't new. This is, it's just that we're now making it useful. And you now know that there's a large remote sensing group at the University of Lethbridge. There's 5 of us that are in the group. That's an unusual collection across Canada. We're one of Canada's largest remote sensing groups, and those are the things that we were interested in. So it's, again, if you name it, we're probably involved. If it involves geographical things across our planet, then we're there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, maybe describe your development of a 6-band system, or better yet, tell us what the bands are, and then maybe about the development that you've made.
Oh, so I do remote sensing fundamental work. So I do remote sensing physics. That's my specialty. So I build things. That's the way I shorten it up. So if scientists can't build their own tools, then they're forced to ask the questions that those who do build the tools ask. I want to ask my own questions. And in order to do that, I have to literally get in and do a little bit of electronics. I do know how to weld, so I build giant robots and things. But I started building camera systems. So these were camera systems that were meant to be inexpensive. I developed, I don't even know how many now. It's quite a few, but if there's an imaging system out there, I've probably tinkered with it in the lab. So and then we would design those things. So the 6-band system that I developed, that was a long time ago, and it was developed specifically around questions to deal with the remote sensing of vegetation. So it's vegetation. If you don't have a farm, you don't eat and you die. So it's really important that we get high quality information about plants generally, but about crops specifically. So in order to do that, I developed a system that had 6 spectral bands. So we're going to place bands in areas where we understand from our biologist colleagues exactly what that plant is doing at that point in terms of how it's reacting to light. So that might be looking at how is it photosynthesizing? Is the chlorophyll active? Those kinds of things. Then we can tell from that, we can go, look, if we see that it's photosynthesizing this much, then we get this is what color it is. But our vision of color extends past what people can see in the visible light range, and we extend off into the infrared. And those are the tricky bits to sense, but we can do that kind of work.
Okay, so Dr. Coburn, this is all like super exciting, but maybe talk about what's the latest and greatest, most groundbreaking stuff that you've done in the past week or month, say.
Well, Jeanette, the most important thing that we've done, and probably for me anyways, in the last few weeks, is the University of Lethbridge with me at the helm was part of the team that was doing the calibration for United States Geological Survey and NASA's latest satellite mission. So Landsat's the most important Earth observation satellite system to date, and we were part of a global team that was out doing the calibration of that sensor.
Okay, so what exactly does that mean? What do you do? What did it do?
Well, the fun part there was when you get a phone call from NASA, you usually pick up. And when they ask if you'd be willing to join the global team to do some calibration for their latest $1 billion satellite effort, you also say yes. And then it was mostly about finding a willing, in this case, a willing rancher down just south of Bow Island who has a grazing lease, and we thank him very much for the opportunity to go out and wander around in this marvelous area of reasonably native prairie. And it's a big, wide area. It's very consistent in terms of its tone. And we just happen to be, so we do research in that area, and we just happen to be in exactly the right spot to help the global calibration effort. So they were putting their current satellite and the next satellite were flying on the same path, which is almost never done. It only was going to happen for a few weeks, and we did happen to get a nice sunny day in southern Alberta to go out and provide data to the United States Geological Survey as well as NASA in order that they can calibrate that sensor.
That's amazing. I'm just curious, when you're researching the land and you contact these ranchers and farmers, what's their reaction?
They oftentimes are confused. They don't realize that we're watching, and it's not for the reasons they think. This is part of a global effort that's been going on since the 70s just to monitor our planet. And I think it's incredibly cool. But we're able to convince them, of course, because a lot of people in the general public don't really understand that this is happening every day, all the time. But we're not up there trying to see if you're doing something nefarious. We're just trying to see what our impact on the world is. So and those are the interesting pieces. But oftentimes they wonder, like, you can see me. I remember when I've contacted several folk, especially in the ranching side, and I'll ask them about their land, and I'll say, well, I need to get over into this area. I need to be in the southwest corner of this particular field at this time. And I see that there's a power line and that you've got a pen over here. And they're like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, look, I'm in Lethbridge, but I'm actually on the government website. I'm able to call it up. Like, I can just zoom in and I can see where that area is, and I can see there's a power line, and I'm going to be at the second power transmission tower, and I need to be in about halfway into your field. Is that okay? And they oftentimes are quite surprised that we can get that kind of detail from space. And I'm always on the other side, because for us, those of us that do the research, we always forget that people don't know that we do this. So there's always this very interesting little moment where they realize that we know, and we realize that they don't know. And then we come to a meeting in the middle somewhere, and we have to tell them that this is okay. This is how we monitor the entire planet. You're not special. We're not even interested in you. We're just going to go out, have a look at what we can see.
Amazing. And Dr. Coburn, if people want to learn more about your work or this technology, where can they look?
University of Lethbridge does have a website. I've got a certain amount of stuff that's up there. I am the department chair, so you can always find me. I'm relatively easy to find. A lot of our work, of course, is published, and those things are all sitting in the public domain, so they're available for people to read. If you need the Coles Notes version of it because it's a little long and it gets a bit boring, then you're always welcome to send me an email, and I'll try to respond to as many questions as we would get.
Awesome. Dr. Craig Coburn, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate hearing about all the great research taking place at the University of Lethbridge, as always.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.